Glory be to the name of our triune God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, yesterday, today, and forevermore. For the past few weeks, we have been studying about a moment called Jehovah's Witnesses. Who are they? What are their beliefs? Where did they come from? What are they doing now? How they are different from the Orthodox Biblical Historic Christianity, and how we are to defend our faith in our time. Last week, the last session, I did a teaching on its founder, Charles Taze Russell. I'm going to do a quick review of the last session. Charles Taze Russell, who lived from 1852 to 1916, is an evangelical turned skeptic. He was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He attended Presbyterian Congregational churches as a child. By the time he was 16, he had abandoned his beliefs, and he was unable to accept the doctrine of hell, and a change took place in his life. Another thing, I taught you another thing, particularly the Adventist movement of the 1869 to 1878, particularly in Russell's day. William Miller, the forefather of the Adventist movement, he predicted that the Christ would return in 1843. It did not happen. He changed the date to 1844, but Christ did not return in 1844. So, Jonas Wendell, in 1869, Charles Russell attended a lecture on hell given by Adventist leader Jonas Wendell. So, from him, Russell was taught that there is no eternal punishment. So, Russell's faith in Bible was restored. And in age 18, he formed a Bible study group known as Bible Students. They started to call him as pastor. And from 1876 to 79, he had an association with a person called Nelson Barber. Barber convinced Russell that Christians, what Christians usually call as the second coming of Christ, was not a literal second coming, but it was an invisible spiritual coming that had already begun in 1874. They collaborated on a book called 3 Worlds or Plan of Redemption. They made their theories public. In 1879, they parted away because of the doctrinal differences, particularly the failed speculation that the church would go to heaven in 1878, because they believed that in 1874 Christ had started ruling. So his spiritual presence had came. So Barber believed that by 1878 the church would go to heaven, but the church has not translated. So Russell started distancing himself from the Adventist movement. From 1879, he launched his own magazine called Zion's Watchtower and Herald of Christ's Presence. It focused on the teaching that Christ's presence had been since 1874. See, Russell rejected the doctrine of Barber that church would go to heaven by 1878, and because that did not come to fruition. But he believed that Christ was already present since 1874, and he started teaching that the spiritual presence of Christ would culminate in the physical climax in 1914 with God's judgment on all human nations. And by 1914, according to Russell's teaching, the world will end and the kingdom of God will be established. In 1880s, Russell established the Watchtower and Tract Society of Pennsylvania and the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of New York. The latter corporation based in New York, it is the international headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses. Russell died in 1916. He believed that Gentile times had ended in 1914 and that World War I was Armageddon. Before, he believed that in 1914 Christ would establish the kingdom of God. But 1914 had passed on, but the kingdom of God had not arrived, but the world war had begun. So he then altered his teaching, saying that this is the beginning of Armageddon. When this world war ends, Christ's physical rule will become a fruition. Before the world war had ended, Charles Russell had died. So This is a simple summary of last session. What happened next? I'm going to pick up from where I have ended. After Charles Russell, what happened? The continuing history of Jehovah's Witnesses. So, a few members were to be noted, particularly a person called Judge Joseph F. Rutherford, who was the chairman from 1916 up until his death in 1942. So, he is one of the centrifugal figure of what is known as Jehovah's Witnesses today. Because the movement of Charles Russell was not known as Jehovah's Witnesses, it was Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. So, how it became as Jehovah's Witnesses? It is because of the person called Rutherford. Judge Joseph Franklin Rutherford, he lived from 1869 November 8 to January 8, 1942. He was the second president of Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania. He played a primary role in the organization and he developed most of the doctrines of today's Jehovah's Witnesses. So he began his career in law, worked as a court stenographer, trial lawyer, prosecutor. Then he became a special judge in the 14th Judicial Court of Missouri after 1895. During that time, he had a special interest in the doctrines of Charles Taze Russell, and after that he was associated with Charles Taze Russell as a legal counselor for the movement. He was baptized in 1906 by the Russell's movement. He was appointed as the legal counsel for Watchtower Society in 1907, as well as a traveling representative for the movement. He was elected as president in 1917. So, throughout his life, particularly in association with the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Watchtower Tract and Bible Society, he is also a part of a lot of controversies with regard to his autocratic behavior, with regard to his leadership, and with regard to his lavish life and personal life and so on. Particularly when he was elected as president, even with the board of directors, a dispute arose and he dismissed all the offenders. Also, he changed many of the doctrines which were taught by Charles Taze Russell. That created a rift between the movement, and that movement split. The Watchtower Tract and Bible Society split into many small movements. And Rutherford developed the movement which was in his hand, and he transitioned it into what is now called as Jehovah's Witnesses. So, when studying about the history of Jehovah's Witnesses, history about Bible student movement has to be discussed. I will teach you about that in the next session. Who are the Bible students? Only if you are thorough with these two movements, these two identities, you will be able to differentiate between a person from Jehovah's Witness movement and a person from Bible students movement. This man, Rutherford, he introduced many doctrinal organizational changes in the movement. He imposed a centralized administrative structure. He later called it as theocracy, requiring all adherents to distribute literature via door-to-door preaching and to provide regular reports of their preaching activity. That is strictly until today followed in Jehovah's Witnesses. He also instituted training programs for public speaking as part of weekly meetings. Also, he imposed a lot of new doctrines. He asserted that Christ died on a tree than a cross. In every image or picture presented by Jehovah's Witnesses, when the crucifixion of Jesus is mentioned, he is posted as hanging upon a tree, not on a cross. So, it is the teaching of Rutherford. He formulated the doctrine of Armageddon as God's war on the wicked. He reinforced the belief that the start of Christ's millennial reign was imminent. He condemned the traditional celebrations of Christians such as Christmas and birthdays, and also he condemned the saluting national flags and singing of national anthems. He is the one who introduced the name Jehovah's Witnesses in 1931, and he introduced the term Kingdom Hall for houses of worship in 1935. He wrote 21 books, and he was credited by the society in 1942 with the distribution of almost 400 million books and booklets. 1 million equals 10 lakh. You can do some max here. Because of his leadership, the membership increased. Overall membership increased more than six-fold by the end of Rutherford's 25 years as a president. He had a poor background, but he developed an interest towards law from the age of 16. He was born in Missouri, but his father encouraged his interest, but he allowed Rutherford to go to college under one condition, that he should pay for a laborer to take his place on the family farm. So he took out on a loan, and he helped to pay for his law studies by working as door-to-door encyclopedia salesman and course stenographer. That's where his academic career started. He then spent 2 years as a judge's intern, became an official court reporter at age 20. Then he was admitted to the Missouri bar at age 22. He then became a trial lawyer for a law firm and served for 4 years in Boonville as a public prosecutor. Then he was appointed as a special judge in the 8th Judicial Court of Missouri, sitting as substitute judge at least once when a regular judge was unable to court him. He was admitted to the New York bar in 1909. He was admitted to practice before the Supreme Court of the United States the same year. So he was trained academically. He was familiar with the law. So he was a good administrator. He was trained like that. So that helped him to shape that organization. By 1894, how he is introduced to the Charles Russell means, in 1894, he purchased 3 volumes of Russell's Million in Dawn series of Bible study booklets from 2 colporteurs who visited his office. Until then, Rutherford was not towards any religion, but he started studying from that series of books, and he saw the enthusiasm and passion of Charles Russell. So he sided towards the movement of Russell, sided towards the religion, the movement of Charles Russell. So he wrote immediately to Watchtower Society to appreciate them for the books. Then a close association started between Russell and Rutherford. He was baptized 12 years later, and he and his wife began holding Bible classes in their home. In 1907, he became the legal counsel for Watchtower and Tract Society. And he was also touring many places to give public talks as a representative for the society. When the founder's health, Russell's health deteriorated, Rutherford represented Russell on his trips to Europe. And he was also in 1915, he was deposed to speak at a major debate with Baptist preacher J.H. Troy over 4 nights in Los Angeles before an audience of 12,000 debating various subjects, including the state of the dead, hellfire, and Christ's second coming. After the death of Russell, he became one of the 7 directors of Watchtower Society. He joined Vice President Alfred Ritchie and Secretary Treasurer William E. Van Amberg on a 3-man committee as an interim committee until a new president was elected at the AGM the following January. He was also joined a 5-person editorial committee to run the Watchtower magazine. When Russell's will was found, it was drawn in 1907. Russell had named 5 people he wished to run the magazine after the death of Russell. Rutherford's name appeared only it contains second 2 list. See, here we can notice the administrative principles of those movements, how it today still stands as a solid movement. Russell had formulated a will on who should run the magazine. It's his flagship magazine. He had formulated 2 lists. In the first list, Rutherford's name is missing. Rutherford's name is not there. His name only appeared on a second list of 5 alternative members to fill any vacancy that arose. If the first membership, no one is willing to take up that position, then the secondary chance will begin. But he became the one among the 5% of editorial committee to run the Watchtower magazine. Even he was in an interim committee to select the next president. He had a desire to become a president. So many people noted that he had a very passion to capture the throne. As he wished, on January 6, 1917, Rutherford, at his age 47, he was elected the president of Watchtower Society unopposed at their Pittsburgh convention. Bylaws were passed and they gave him full charges of its affairs worldwide. But within 5 months, by June of the same 1917, 4 of those 7 Watchtower Society directors, namely Robert H. Hish, Alfred I. Ritchie, Isaac F. Hoskins, and James D. Wright, they gave a statement that they have erred in endorsing Rutherford's expanded powers, and they claim that Rutherford is becoming autocratic. They claim that he is become the soul of everything. He is not adhering to the voices of other co-directors or the board trustees. His attempt to rescind the new bylaws and reclaim the board's authority from the president. But Rutherford claimed that he had by then detected conspiracy among the directors to seize the control of society. So there arose a conflict in the director board of the society. In July, Rutherford gained a legal opinion from the Philadelphia corporation lawyer that none of his opposers were legally directors of the society, because he himself was a trained lawyer and became a judge. He scrutinized, is there any way to safeguard me from those people? And he found a solution. The Watchtower's 1959 account of its history claimed the legal advice given to the Outs directors confirmed that given to Rutherford. So he had an opportunity and he claimed that they were not legally powerful. So there must be something. So in July 12, after 1 month, he filled what he called as 4 vacancies. According now, he claims that those 4 people were never legally directors. But before 5 months, they only elected him as president. And now he appointed 4 people, W.E. Spill, J.A. Bohanat, and George H. Fisher as directors. And between August and November, the society and the 4 Outs directors published a series of pamphlets, each side accusing the other of ambitious and reckless behavior. Each side accusing the other. The former directors also claimed Rutherford had acquired all headquarters workers to sign a petition supporting him and threatened dismissal for any who refused to sign. Those 4 people had claimed that he threatened all the workers. If they were elected to sign the petition, everyone of the society will be dismissed. So they could not withstand his force. So the former directors left Brooklyn headquarters on August 8, and on January 5, 1918, shareholders returned Rutherford to office. So this controversy also fractured the Bible student movement, and some congregations split into opposing groups. Some were loyal to Rutherford and some to other board of directors. By mid-1919, about 1 out of 7 Bible student movement had chose to leave rather than accept Rutherford leadership. 1 out of 7 came out of the movement. Over the following decade, they joined other groups or formed other groups, namely Layman's Home Missionary Movement, Dawn Bible Student Association, Pastoral Bible Institute, Elijah Voice Movement, Concordant Publishing Concern, Eagle Society. So that is another history, Bible Student Movement. So another thing to be noted is in 1916, a person called Clayton J. Woodworth, he sought the approval of the executive committee to produce a book about the prophecies of Revelation Ezekiel. It is said as it is based on Russell's writings. The finished mystery, the seventh volume, posthumous volume of Russell's studies in the scriptures, 7-volume book. On the last session I mentioned. This book proceeded without the knowledge of board of redactors and editorial committee and was released by Rutherford to headquarters staff on July 17, 1917. That is the same day he announced the appointment of 4 new directors. So he is doing some things which is not notified to the headquarters. So there is also a mystery surrounding it, whether it is really written by Charles Taze Russell or not, because many oppose its teaching that the final volume, it is the belief of Rutherford rather than Russell. He changed the work of Russell. That is what the opponents of Rutherford claimed. This work is denounced by Rutherford's opponent, but it became a bestseller because among the public, this is the unpublished final volume of Charles Taze Russell. What he is going to say about the Ezekiel and Revelation, and it was translated into 6 languages, and it sold millions. Because of this release of this book, he faced legal troubles, and he was banned by the Canadian government for what a Winnipeg newspaper described as seditious and anti-war statements. And in early May 1918, the US Attorney General condemned the finished mystery as one of the most dangerous examples of propaganda, a work written in extremely religious language and distributed in enormous numbers. So warrants were issued to arrest Rutherford and 7 other watchtower directors, and they were imprisoned. But in 1990, all charges were dropped, and they were free from all these legal difficulties. So he feared that because he is going to jail, someone will capture the throne. So now he was released from all his legal charges, and the first thing he does is to restructure and change the whole organizational setup. He started making a major reorganization of the Bible student activities. In May 1919, he announced a publication, a new magazine called Golden Age. Later, now it is published as Awake, because I told you earlier that the Russell's will decreed that society should publish no other periodicals. He has not any full control over it. He started a new magazine. He expanded the society's printing facilities, and in 1970 introduced a requirement of weekly reports of Bible students' preaching activity. Every person who is associated with that movement, he has to report weekly what that person is doing, how he has witnessed, how many people he had met. Then, beginning with the 8-day convention in Ohio in September 1922, he started a series of major international conventions under the theme Advertise the King and Kingdom. They attracted crowds up to 20,000. Audiences were urged to herald the message far and wide. They propagated it as a fulfillment of Matthew 24:14. Then in 1928, he began to teach that the Cedar Point Convention, the events from it fulfilled the prophecy of Daniel 12:11. In 1920, he published a booklet called Millions Now Living Will Never Die. It was now published in 1920. 1920, it was published, Millions Living Now Will Never Die. It was followed by 19 hardcover books, Creation, Jehovah, Children. His publication reached a total printing of 36 million copies. In 1925, he gained full control over what is to be taught in Watchtower Society publications. Because of a dispute that arose, he claimed that Satan had tried to prevent the publication of his articles but failed in that effort. So he used every means to expand his message. In 1924, he started a 15-minute radio broadcast based on Staten Island as far as 480 radio stations. A 1931 talk was broadcast throughout North America, Australia, France, but NBC and BBC radio networks banned his broadcast. In 1928, he began to abolish the system of electing elders by congregational voting. Up until then, congregations were electing elders. He dismissed that, and he asserted that electing elders was unscriptural. In 1933, he claimed that abolishing elective elders was a fulfillment of prophecy of Daniel 8, chapter 8, verse 13 and 14. In 1931, only he proposed a new name called Jehovah's Witnesses to differentiate his organization from the proliferation of other groups that follow Russell's teachings. But now, no Jehovah's Witness people will say that. They will say that only the Jehovah's name is the true name. Father is equal to Jehovah, so we are to always call him as Jehovah, and we are his witnesses. But why he changed that name is because of this, to differentiate his movement from other Bible student movements. In 1937, the door-to-door preaching program was extended to formally include back calls on interested people, and witnesses are urged to start 1-hour Bible studies in their households. In 1930s, he advocated the use of sound cars, phonographs, in which talks of Rutherford were played to passers by and households, car and bus ministry. In 1938, he introduced the term theocracy. Theocracy means rule of God, to describe the denomination system of government. He explains that the theocracy at present administered by the Watchtower and Bible Tract Society, of which Judge Rutherford is president and general manager. By 1942, the year of his death, the worldwide attendance of their annual memorial of Christ's death was 1,40,450. In between that, he made a lot of doctrinal changes. If you are to speak about doctrines of Jehovah's Witnesses, you should label it as past and present and future. They have changed many of their doctrines. Many doctrines had evolved, particularly many of their prophecies had failed. Charles Taze Russell's prophecies have failed. Prophecies of Armageddon and prophecies of Kingdom of Earth, so they have to reinterpret them, and they have to change the date. So they have changed many of their doctrines. If a person asks if the Trinity is false, Jesus is not God, so we have to ask, are you sure you stand with this doctrine, or you are going to change this doctrine also? Because you have a long-lasting tradition of changing your doctrines. So they will not mention you that. So he had changed a lot of doctrines of his predecessor, Charles Taze Russell. So I will tackle that in another session. What are the doctrines of Jehovah's Witnesses, past, present? His character and his attitudes were also studied by many. Biographers, some described him as a tall and solidity built with a senatorial demeanor, and another account says he did not hide his feelings, his bluntness. Another says he was a charitable and generous, and some says he was a dogmatic and insensitive person, obsessed with his own special importance. So the character of his the personality and character of Rutherford, within that organization itself, they are divided. So with regard to his personal life, he married Mary Falcom Fetzer on December 31, 1891. His only child was born in November 10, 1892. The couple separated after Rutherford became president. So, but she remained an active member of Jehovah's Witnesses until her death in 1962. So, and another charge imposed against him is his use of luxurious methods and his luxurious lifestyle. It is said that because of his imprisonment, he reportedly lost the use of one lung. So, to cope up with this, he was encouraged by doctor to spend as much time as possible in a more favorable climate. So, in 1929, he bought a residence called Berig Sarim. The House of Princes was constructed San Diego, California for Rutherford's use. Initially as a winter accommodation, later as his full-time residence. So he died at that property in 1942. It was sold in 1948. So the method of accommodation of him and his personal conduct attracted criticism from his movement and the people from Bible students itself. So the former branch manager of Canada wrote a public letter to Rutherford in 1937. He was expelled the same month, claiming that Rutherford had exclusive use of luxurious and expensive residences, Brooklyn, Staten Island, Germany, San Diego, and he had two Cadillac. Cadillac is a luxury car, and alleged that on more than one occasion he had purchased for Rutherford cases of whiskey, brandy, beer, and other liquors, and go from drink to drink. And there were also other legal and other issues. At age 70, he died of cancer of colon. But he had cancer of colon, but the doctors said that the cause of his death was uremia due to carcinoma of the rectum due to pelvic metastasis. But he was buried after 5 months after his death. He was buried 5 months after his death. What is the reason? Did people expected for him to rise from the death? No. But he intended himself to be buried in his Beth Sarim, his luxury mansion. But legally, that is not a legally sound cemetery. So, legally he could not be buried there. So, a legal dispute arose and the witnesses collected 14,000 signatures for two petitions, one supporting his burial at Beth Sarim, another for a preferred site on a nearby society named Beth Shan, that Rutherford dying wish must be granted. So, it seems it is not granted. So, by the May 4, 1942 issue of the Time magazine noted Rutherford's burial at Roswell, New York on Staten Island. A private burial plot for Watchtower branch volunteers on Woodrow Road. So, if you go to there today, you cannot find the cemetery because they claim that a Watchtower caretaker on a graveyard, on that graveyard said in 2002, I couldn't tell you who is buried on it because it has absolutely no markers or headstones. So, this is the personality, this is the man called Rutherford. He is the one who had formulated the movement which is now today, Jehovah's Witnesses. So, many teachings including refusing blood transfusions, abandoning from saluting the national flag or reciting the national anthem, or commanding people, urging people to not celebrate their birthdays or Christmas or any other festival. Particularly, it is the doctrine of Judge Rutherford. But he had also many failed prophecies. His material, now millions now living will never die. But it failed. It was published in 1920. The people who are joining the movement, they were encouraged like that. Faithful witnesses who will continue to support this organization, you will receive promised health, prosperity, everlasting life on the new earth, because millions living now will never die. So if you want to taste that blessings, so you have to invest in the moment, our moment. If you only invest in our moment, you will receive promised health, prosperity, everlasting life on a new earth. I also mentioned another term, Beth Sarim. In his book, Rutherford predicted that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and other patriarchs would rise from the dead in 1925 to establish a worldwide government. So, where will these witnesses stay? They cannot stay in roads, no. They cannot beg, no. They cannot go to hotels. So, to house these Old Testament pillars of faith, a 10-room Spanish-style mansion dubbed Betsarim, that is called House of Princes, was erected in the Kennington neighborhood of San Diego. But 1925 came, no Old Testament saint visited, so Rutherford made personal use of the mansion, and he used 2 Cadillacs that was purchased to transport Old Testament saints. Then in 1942, that Betsarim was praised as a monument to the faithfulness of Jehovah's Witnesses. He had made a great impact towards that movement. He reigned in that movement as a president for 25 years. He wrote 20 books, 400 million copies of his books and pamphlets were published. The movement was now known as Jehovah's Witnesses. Meeting houses came to be known as Kingdom Halls. Celebrations of birthdays and holidays banned. Members were forbidden to serve in military, saluting the flag and reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. All members were compulsorily made to engage in door-to-door preaching and literature distribution and write weekly reports. Weekly training programs were initiated, and he changed many of the doctrines of his predecessor Charles Taze Russell. And also he continually prophesied, gave many false prophecies. In 1941, as America was preparing for war, he announced that the Battle of Armageddon was only months away. But America now still stands as a nation, but Jesus Christ has not returned yet, as Jehovah's Witnesses claim. So, this was the man behind the Jehovah's Witnesses movement, particularly to say. And after his death, another person called Nathan Crore became the president. He became the president in 1942. Now the power of society was placed in the hands of a board known as governing body. Up until then, the books bearing the name of Charles Taze Russell will carry his name, and the books written by Rutherford will carry his name. Rutherford in his leadership had abstained from the use of Russell's material. Now only Bible student movements only promote the material of Charles Taze Russell. After Nathan Crore had taken the leadership position, now published all its books anonymously. Previously it carried either Russell's or Rutherford's name. Even now, if you see their pamphlets or their material, no author or no editor, no one is mentioned. So that started from him. Under his leadership, the witnesses were equipped with much more Bible study tools, particularly their own translation. They had made their own translation called New World Translation of the Bible. They claim that that is the only perfect translation of the modern era. So we are going to spend an entire session to speak about that. Is that Bible truly reliable? Because using that Bible only, they will misquote the true scriptural verses and twist the scriptures. Another work was done called Kingdom Interlinear Translation of the New Testament Scriptures. So it contains a legitimate scholarly Greek text and their word for word rendering underneath the Greek words. They underneath read what this Greek word means. Whether it means or not, that is to be scrutinized. And the text of the New World Translation on the right side. So they were also trained to speak conversationally about the Bible with prospective converts. So that progressed. In the 1960s, the Watchtower publications began presenting the theory that 1975 would mark 6,000 years since the creation of Adam and Eve. So, according to their calendar, 7th day is the Sabbath, rest day, for 6 days, labor. So, according to their calendar, 1975, the 6,000 year of the creation of man would be accomplished. They proposed a date they used many dates, tracked many dates. They formulated a chronological order. So they believed that in 1975 Armageddon would take place. See, for how many years they are waiting for Armageddon, it comes and goes, but they will never learn from their lesson. So I have uttered a false prophecy, so I have to repent. No, even up till today they will say that that Christian church is wrong, you are wrong, you are wrong. But if you study their history, full of failed predictions. During that time, because of their propaganda, many witnesses sold their homes and quit their jobs to devote full times themselves to full time witnessing efforts, because Armageddon is going to come, Christ is going to rule. So why therefore we should have a house? But 1975 came and went away as usual, and many witnesses were disillusioned, but majority remained faithful because of their structure. This is during the time of Nathan Crore, and then after Nathan Crore, Frederick W. France, who lived from 1893 to 1992, he became the president. When Knorr died in 1977, France became the president. France was not trained in biblical studies of theology, but it was said that he was more knowledgeable than in their areas than their predecessors. In his leadership, witnesses learned to express their beliefs in more biblical and evangelical sounding language. So they changed their terminology to cope up with other church members, other Christian believers, and they used common terminology to communicate their teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses. In 1980, the society forced out many prominent leaders, and another shake-up took place because it was said that many were allegedly disloyal to the organization. Among that one was Raymond France, who was Frederick France's nephew and as a member of governing body. So a controversy also started. What are the causes? The 1975 debacle prompted many witnesses to abandon the Watchtower's chronology. So many witnesses, they gave up. So we are not going, because many sold their homes. They are without anything. Some leaders, including Ray France, rejected the society's teaching that 144 Christians will be born again. It is also one of their teachings. So because he expressed his opposition towards that teaching, he said, how could only 144,000 Christians will be born again? So what happened? He was forced off the governing body and was later disfellowshipped or excommunicated. The reason cited was for eating a meal with an ex-witnesses. Stated, you ate a meal with the ex-witness, who happened to be his employer and landlord. So Fred France died in December 1992. So after that, they were keen, because every leader of the movement has built their life with controversies, allegations. So they made sure that not much information of their president or movement should be made public. Then only they could be free from any controversy. In 1992, Milton George Henschel, a member of governing body, succeeded France as the president of Watchtower Society. In 2000, members of the governing body, everyone resigned from the position of the board and its subsidiary corporation in order to focus on doctrinal matters. What took place? It was said that we are all resigning because we are to focus upon doctrinal matters. Then Don Alden Adams replaced Henschel as president. In 2014, Adams died and Robert Siranko became the president of society. They started building a new world headquarters in New York. First they had headquarters in Brooklyn, so they sold that, and it was completed in 2016. Now if you were to search for that history, the present scenario and present organizational shake-up and the organizational uh, controversies were not made known to public. This is the historical summary of the movement called Jehovah's Witnesses. So, if a person who has no knowledge of this movement and he bluntly joins in this movement, he will see it as an organization of God. He see it as heaven. But if he delves into this, and if he is a serious thinker with regard to what are the prophecies uttered by these people, and what are their beliefs, had it led them to a practical and sanctified life? No. Because without revering and honoring the person and nature of Lord Jesus Christ, there is no sanctification, there is no holiness. So, this is the history of Jehovah's Witnesses. So, in the next talk, I will be dealing about Bible student women, even though that is not our part of original study, because they are the ones who are working very swiftly in our area. They are the ones who are promoting the material of Charles Taze Russell. The Jehovah's Witnesses are not promoting. But these people are promoting. You can see the pyramid structure, many charts and layouts. All are translated into Tamil language and made published in their websites. All are available in the Tamil language. They are working very hard. And they are also conducting Bible classes in Kanyakumari district. And if a common church believer asks, are you from Jehovah's Witnesses? They will say, I am not from Jehovah's Witnesses. Because this is the reason, how they are operating. So, there we will conclude their history, and then from then we will jump on to their doctrines. What are the doctrines of their past, and what are the doctrines which they believe today, and we will give a strong refutation of their false doctrines.